stranger to macaroni and cheese. And so in this recipe, we'll give you a plant-based version that is, something that your kids will love, but that you can feel good about giving them. So it's rich in, healthy fats and fiber and protein from nuts. We have onions, carrots, potatoes. It's a rich source of B12 from nutritional yeast. And then I'll explain why we're using all the other ingredients that we have here as I add them. And whether or not you use a non-stick pan here really depends on whether you want to use a broth to saute or you want to use oil to saute. I'm going to use a little bit of oil, but this pan just works really well, really well with this burner, so we'll go ahead and go with it. Also allows you to, use a little bit less than you normally would. So we have that, and as soon as it's nice and shimmering, I'm going to add my vegetables. And you don't have to worry too much about how the vegetables are cut up. We're going to blend this in a moment, so as long as they're roughly the same size, or they're cut so they'll cook roughly at the same time, that's great. And now I'll add some yellow potatoes. We're just going to saute this just for 3 to 5 minutes till the vegetables soften a bit, and then we'll add the rest of our ingredients. All right, our onions are starting to become translucent. I'm going to add the rest of our ingredients. It's okay if you get a little browning on this. It actually adds to the flavor of the sauce. You just don't want anything to be, burnt where it would add a bitter flavor. So we're going to add some other ingredients. So it might seem like some of these ingredients are odd as we add them, but the end product will really be that a lot of these flavors go together to give it a cheesy flavor, like a cheesy sauce, despite there not being any actual cheese in the sauce. So we have cashews, which don't add much flavor because they're raw, unroasted cashews, but they're going to add the creaminess, a lot of the body to the sauce. We'll add some nutritional yeast. Then we'll add some turmeric. And if this starts to stick at all, you can just grab a little bit of water and deglaze your pan. And I'll keep adding my other sauce ingredients. I have some mustard. You'll probably have to use a little spoon to get that out. This is just plain yellow mustard. Don't replace it with Dijon. It gives it a really strong Dijon flavor. You really just use plain yellow mustard. A little cayenne. A little bit of black pepper. And a little bit of salt. All the salt in the sauce is actually measured out here. And as that gets soaked up, then we'll just add some unsweetened soy milk, and you can really use any unsweetened plant milk that you want. Soy milk tends to taste the least sweet to me, and I think that gives a better sauce at the end. You can also, if you're not opposed to having dairy in here, you could use dairy milk as well if you're just trying to cut back on some of the other stuff that you would normally find in macaroni and cheese, but you're okay with having some milk. Nothing's really going to stick to this nonstick pan, but the reason I'm not pouring it all in is it keeps the heat up in the pan, so it keeps everything cooking. If you were to just pour it all in there, you'd have to wait for it to heat back up before you could continue cooking the ingredients, so it would just take longer to make overall. This also allows some of it to evaporate, which enriches and kind of condenses the flavor, so it doesn't taste so watery at the end, compared to if you just poured it all in. You want to stir this constantly. This is not something you want to walk away from. At this point, if you feel more comfortable having it in a saucepan, you can always transfer it to a saucepan, a higher sided pot, and stir. I like to use fewer pans, so I'm just going to keep cooking in here. And if, the bubbling starts to go down, you can always turn the heat up as you go, as you get more liquid in the pan. All right, I'm just going to simmer this for a few minutes until when you stick a fork into the potatoes that they feel like they're all fully cooked. And at that point, we'll be ready to blend this up, and we'll blend this up into a creamy sauce that we'll use with macaroni. And we don't want this at a rolling boil. It can cause the sauce to separate too. We just want it to be at a nice simmer. Okay, we finished cooking this. We just simmer it for a few minutes. with all the ingredients in there. And now I'm going to move this off to the side and we'll pull in the blender and show you how you turn it into a sauce. All right, so just to be safe with our hot simmering sauce, we went and poured it from the pan into the blender over the sink. Always pour hot sauces away from you. Don't pour them toward you because they're likely to splatter onto you or in your face, which can be dangerous. Also, it's just a mess, especially with the turmeric. If it gets on your clothes, it's especially light colored clothes, it's almost certainly going to stain. So just going to blend this until it's smooth without any grittiness, and I'll show you again how to test for that. So one thing I want to mention is, especially when you're blending hot liquids, you want to start at the lowest setting and go up. You also want to make sure you hold on the top. Sometimes the heat, the centrifugal force from the blender and the heat will kind of push the lid off and it can splatter, especially if it's full. If you're ever blending hot soups, you never want to fill your blender more than half full because it's a burn risk. So I always hold the top on, go ahead and get started. So we'll go ahead and test and see if this is done. And besides wanting it to be creamy, you want to make sure everything gets blended in. If you're making this for kids and they're anything like mine, if there's like a little fleck of a different color in there that may be something, that could be concerning, it'll stop dinner. So we want to make sure to take a look and make sure this is well blended. And the goal isn't to sneak anything in, but just to make it look uniform. All right, so this is really hot. So unlike in other sauces that were room temperature where I stuck my fingers in and rubbed them together, you got to get some on a spoon, take it out, and blow on it till it's cool enough to taste. You can see it's a very thick sauce. It's already basically like a thickened cheese sauce. You don't have to cook it down more. But you can if you need to. If it's on the thinner side, so you haven't had as much evaporation when you were adding in the milk to deglaze, then and it's too thin, you can always simmer it for longer in the pan. It's just a kind of an optional step. Yeah, so it's totally smooth and creamy. We don't need to blend it any longer. If it was gritty, you just keep blending it. This is a really high-powered blender. It's going to do this much quicker than, say, what a less expensive or less powerful blender would do at home. But your blender will eventually get it there. You just have to have patience. So just keep blending until there's no sandiness or grittiness feeling. It should be just as creamy as a cheese sauce. Now that this is blended up smooth, if it's thick enough that you don't need to cook it to condense it down anymore or to reduce it anymore on the stovetop in your skillet, then you can go ahead and just season to taste right in the blender. And so I have a little bit of apple cider vinegar. We'll add a little bit of tang. So, cheese sauces have a little bit of tang to them, a little lemon juice. There are two things that both have some acid, and it's just so that there's not an overpowering lemon or an overpowering vinegar taste. The combination is just a little bit more balanced. I'll just blend this up just to mix, and then we'll taste it. Again, just be careful, this is pretty hot. It's pretty close. It just it's a little shy on salt, and so when I'm tasting a sauce, I'm just tasting to ensure that the flavor is kind of going all the way back on my tongue. Right now it's sitting about midway to 2/3 the way, so it just means that if you add a little bit more salt, I might add just a tiny bit more lemon juice as well, and then blend this up, and then we'll give it another taste. So, okay, so now I've added a little bit of lemon. If you didn't have that and you wanted to add a few drops of apple cider vinegar, just a few drops of something acidic with that couple extra pinches of salt. We'll taste this again. It's pretty good. Just needs another couple pinches of salt and we're good. And then, especially if you're on the light end of salting, then it may be that much more important that you salt the water for your noodles, because you don't want to have a bland, bland sauce or bland noodles if you're, you don't have to over salt the sauce if you're also going to salt the water. So kind of keep the whole dish in mind when you're adjusting your seasoning. And now it's cooled down quite a bit. I'm going to do the finger taste here. It's really good. So now we're where we want it to be. And we just need to cook our noodles and we'll mix them together, and that's really it. This is a no-bake macaroni and cheese, you know, kind of to simulate what you would make on the stovetop. So now we're ready to boil our macaroni noodles. You can really use any kind that you like. I think since you're already making a lot of health modifications to the sauce, it's kind of nice for this just to use regular macaroni noodles, but you know, whatever fits your diet and taste preferences will work great here. So I have about a gallon of boiling water. I'm just gonna add about a tablespoon of salt to that. And now we'll add the elbow pasta. Elbow pasta is just another name for macaroni. I just want to give it a good stir so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. If it doesn't come right back up to a boil, you know, just make sure once it does, you give it a good stir, and then usually you can just cover it and let it go. Covering it will also help bring it up to temperature quicker. So this just said it took about 5 minutes to cook, so we'll come back when it's 5 minutes is up and taste it, make sure it's al dente, and then we'll stir together our sauce and macaroni and we'll have dinner. So our time is up on our elbow pasta and macaroni, so we're just going to test it, see if it's ready. And since this is not going to get cooked in any sauce, we really want to make sure it's all the way done. There's not going to be an option to, you know, continue cooking it in a liquid after we drain it. Just going to give it like 60 more seconds and then I think we'll be ready. It's a little bit hard. So it's been about another minute. Pretty confident that this is done, but you know, just to be sure, we'll go ahead and taste another noodle. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go drain this well in a colander, and then we'll come back and we just mix it together with the sauce and it's ready. So here is our drained elbow macaroni. Just going to, and if your sauce has been sitting there for a minute, you can always turn your blender on just to stir it up again, but you know, it's already fully blended, so we'll just pour this in. And see that nice creamy sauce there? Usually need most of it, but I'll just save a little bit back in case we feel like we don't need all of it. Probably enough to coat, but you know, this is quite a low calorie sauce for the most part. You know, other than the cashews in there, everything is, you know, very low calorie, mostly just vegetables. And so go ahead and just put the rest of it on, give it that, you know, little extra creaminess. You don't have to be too worried about having extra sauce. So you can see how beautiful that looks, and it's always nice to put it into a serving dish. I like to do this family style just because, you know, macaroni and cheese is such a homey dish. Okay. So now you can see that we have our plant-based macaroni and cheese, and this is, you know, a great main dish. Be ready for having a nice side salad or something else with a lot of rich color, you know, something a little lighter to go along with this, you know, richer, creamier dish. And while this is totally plant-based, I also wanted to mention, you know, this idea of, you know, moving along a spectrum, and this is actually a great opportunity to add a little bit of actual like shredded or cubed cheese in. You know, the appearance is exactly like macaroni and cheese, but the flavor, it's cheesy, but it, you know, if someone's really used to having macaroni and cheese every day, they'll notice that you know, there's a difference in taste. And so one way to, you know, kind of bridge the difference is to have just a little bit of shredded cheese mixed in, especially when it's warm and it will melt in there. And then you get, you know, this real cheesiness without having it just be, you know, this load of saturated fat and just a load of cheese in there. You can get it by with just having a little bit, and it's a really delicious dish.